Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like the universe was trying to tell you something, but you just couldn't figure out what? Have you ever experienced a strange coincidence, a sudden gut feeling, or a door closing unexpectedly, leaving you wondering if there was a deeper meaning behind it? What if I told you that these moments weren't random, that they were signs from God, but you've been ignoring them? We often expect God's voice to come like thunder, loud, clear, and undeniable, but more often, He speaks in whispers. He guides us through subtle nudges, repeated patterns, moments of peace, and even through life's obstacles. Yet, we brush these signs aside, labeling them as mere coincidence or overthinking. But here's the truth. Ignoring God's voice doesn't mean He's silent. It only means we're not listening. And the most dangerous part? The longer we ignore His signs, the harder it becomes to hear them. So, before you miss another message that could change your life, pause, open your heart, because today I'm going to share with you 7 signs God is speaking to you, but you're ignoring them. And by the end of this, you may realize that He's been speaking to you all along. You just didn't notice. Are you ready to start listening? Let's begin. There are moments when a strange unease settles within us, an unrest that no comfort or distraction can silence. It is not the anxiety of deadlines or the weariness of routine, but something deeper, a stirring of the soul. This restlessness often arrives uninvited, creeping into quiet moments and making us question everything we thought was certain. It may come as a sudden discontent with our work, a weariness in familiar friendships, or an inexplicable sadness when everything around us appears fine. We may try to dismiss it, blaming fatigue or circumstance, but it lingers. The world offers countless ways to numb this feeling: busyness, entertainment, even noble pursuits. Yet it persists. What if, instead of pushing it aside, we paused and listened? Restlessness, though uncomfortable, is often a whisper from above, urging us to pay attention to what truly matters. This stirring can be a sign that we are out of step with our true purpose. We may have built lives that look successful but feel hollow. Perhaps we have chased achievements that promised satisfaction but delivered emptiness. When God speaks through restlessness, it is not to punish us, but to awaken us. He unsettles our comfort so that we might seek something more enduring. Often, people cling to familiar patterns because change feels uncertain, but it is precisely in that discomfort that God is calling us forward, prompting us to examine our desires and question if they align with what is truly good. The soul, much like a compass, becomes restless when it senses we are traveling in the wrong direction, yet many of us ignore the signal. We silence it with more work, more distraction, or more self-assurance. But the longer we ignore it, the louder it becomes. God's voice, though gentle, is persistent. He is not in the business of allowing us to settle for less than the fullness of life He intended. Restlessness is often His mercy. It breaks through our complacency and points us towards something greater. It is easy to misunderstand this discomfort as a sign that something is wrong with us. We may feel guilty for being ungrateful or lost. But in reality, it may be a divine invitation to grow. God rarely shouts, He often nudges, and those nudges often come through our longings, the desire for meaning, for truth, for something beyond what the world offers. Ignoring them may bring temporary peace, but it also leads to stagnation. Listening, however, opens the possibility of transformation. When we feel restless, the wisest question to ask is not, how can I get rid of this feeling, but what is this feeling trying to tell me? Sometimes the answer is to move. Sometimes it is to stay but change. And sometimes it is simply to draw nearer to the one who placed that longing within us. Restlessness, though uncomfortable, is sacred. It is often the beginning of a conversation with God, one where He is not only speaking, but waiting for us to finally listen. Life often unfolds in ways we do not expect. Plans fail, doors close, and paths we were certain of suddenly vanish. In those moments, frustration sets in. We question why things didn't work out, why opportunities slip through our fingers, or why life seems to be leading us nowhere. Yet, what feels like rejection is often divine redirection. Closed doors are not a punishment, they are a form of guidance. When God intervenes to stop our plans, it is not to harm us, but to steer us towards something better, something we may not yet see. It is easy to misinterpret setbacks as signs of failure. We believe that if something is good, it should come easily. But often, God uses closed doors to protect us from choices that would harm us or lead us away from our true purpose. Sometimes, what we desperately want is not what we truly need. A denied job, a failed relationship, or a missed opportunity may sting in the moment, but in time, we often see how those losses were actually blessings. Many people look back on their greatest disappointments and realize they were turning points. Moments where a no from life became a yes to something far greater. God also uses detours to build our character. The path to our destination is rarely a straight line. We may face obstacles and delays that seem pointless, but every twist in the road serves a purpose. Detours often teach us patience, humility, and trust, virtues we cannot gain through easy paths. Think of how many great stories involve the hero losing their way, only to discover something valuable along the journey that they would never have found on the direct route. It is the same in our lives. The delays and diversions, frustrating as they are, may be preparing us for what is ahead. But perhaps the hardest part is that God's redirection rarely comes with an explanation. He closes a door without immediately opening another. We are left in the hallway, confused, waiting, and tempted to force our way through a door that was never meant for us. Yet the silence is not abandonment. It is an invitation to trust. God often leads through uncertainty, asking us to walk by faith, not by sight. It is in these moments of confusion that our trust in Him is refined. When faced with closed doors, we often pray for clarity. But what if clarity is not the point? What if the point is to trust the one who holds the keys to every door? We may not see the path ahead, but we can trust the hand that guides us. What feels like an ending may be the first step of a better beginning. The key is to stop seeing closed doors as obstacles and start seeing them as answers. When we surrender our plans and trust the detours, we often find that God was not only leading us somewhere good, He was leading us somewhere far better than we dared to dream. There are times when life seems to echo with the same message over and over again. A phrase in a book, a line from a conversation, or a theme in a sermon keeps appearing, as if the universe is trying to get our attention. At first, we may dismiss it as coincidence, but when the same idea, warning, or encouragement continues to surface, it is often more than chance. It is God speaking through repetition. Unlike human voices, which can be loud and demanding, God's voice is often gentle and persistent. He knows that the human heart is slow to understand and easily distracted, so He repeats His message until we finally listen. God often speaks through patterns and themes that follow us across different areas of life. We may hear a sermon about forgiveness, then see a social media post on letting go of resentment, and later have a friend share a personal story of reconciliation, all within days of each other. It is not a coincidence, but a divine pattern, signaling that forgiveness is the lesson we are meant to embrace. The repetition is a gift, not a nuisance. It is God's way of ensuring that the message reaches us from every angle. Sometimes we ignore these repeated messages because they are uncomfortable. We hear the call to change a habit, leave a toxic relationship, or take a leap of faith, but we resist. Instead of acknowledging the message, we convince ourselves that we are imagining things. but the repetition continues, through books, conversations, or even dreams, because God's voice is persistent when it concerns something crucial for our well-being. The more we ignore it, the louder it seems to get. Repeated messages can also come through people. When friends, family, or even strangers give us similar advice without knowing each other's conversations, it is a sign worth noticing. Often, God uses others to speak when we are too clouded by our emotions to hear Him directly. However, we must be discerning. Not every repeated voice is from God. Some are from the world or from our fears. The difference is that God's repeated messages, even when they challenge us, bring clarity, truth, and a deeper sense of purpose. The most dangerous response to repeated messages is indifference. When we ignore them for too long, our hearts can become numb. The same warnings or opportunities that once felt urgent begin to fade into the background. But God, in His mercy, often gives us multiple chances to hear and respond. The wise person pays attention early, recognizing that repetition is God's way of highlighting what truly matters. When we notice the same theme appearing repeatedly in our lives, the right response is to pause and ask, "What is God trying to tell me?" Ignoring it may lead to regret, but listening can lead to transformation. Often, the most important lessons come not in loud commands, but in quiet, persistent echoes. Echoes that, if heeded, can change the course of our lives. In life, we often face choices that leave us torn, uncertain, and anxious. The path ahead may be unclear and the stakes may feel high, but sometimes, amidst the confusion, there comes an unshakable peace. A deep, quiet assurance that transcends all logic. This peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of clarity within the storm. It is a sign that God is speaking, guiding us through the chaos with a certainty that defies understanding. This kind of peace is distinct from comfort. Comfort can be false and fleeting, masking our fears or feeding our desires. But divine peace is steady and profound, often coming when a decision feels right, even if it is difficult. It is the calm after prayer, the stillness after wrestling with uncertainty, the quiet confidence that says, "This is the way, walk in it." It is the kind of peace that allows a person to leave a secure job, to pursue their true calling, or to stand firm in a difficult truth when compromise would be easier. It is important to understand that this peace does not mean the absence of fear or struggle. The heart may still race, and doubts may still knock at the door. Yet, beneath the surface, there is a sense of alignment, a knowing that, despite the difficulty, the choice is right. This is because divine peace is rooted not in circumstances, but in trust. When we are aligned with God's will, our souls find rest, even if our minds cannot fully comprehend the path ahead. Often, we ignore this peace because it leads us toward a harder path. We may feel called to forgive someone who wronged us, or to take a risk that feels uncomfortable. The world tells us to choose safety, but God's peace calls us to choose what is true and good. The difficulty of the path does not negate the peace. Rather, the peace becomes our anchor through the difficulty. There are also times when the absence of peace is God's way of speaking. A lucrative opportunity may arise, but if it is accompanied by an unsettling feeling that will not leave, it may be a warning. No matter how appealing a choice looks on the surface, a restless spirit is often a sign to pause and reconsider. Ignoring this inner discomfort can lead to regret, while honoring it can save us from unseen harm. The challenge is learning to recognize this peace and trust it. We often wait for perfect clarity, but God rarely provides it up front. Instead, He gives us a peace that passes understanding, a compass within rather than a map ahead. The wise person follows that peace, knowing it is not a fleeting emotion, but a sign of divine guidance. In the end, the question is not whether God is speaking through peace, but whether we are willing to trust it. If we listen, we will find that the peace He gives is not just a feeling, but a path. A path that may not always be easy, but will always be right. Within every human heart there is a voice, quiet, persistent, and often uncomfortable. It is the voice that pricks our conscience when we do wrong and urges us toward what is good, even when it is difficult. This voice is not mere instinct or social conditioning. It is something deeper. It is a sign that God is speaking through our conscience, calling us to live in truth and integrity. Yet, how often do we ignore it, excuse it, or drown it out with noise? The conscience is a compass placed within us to guide our moral choices. When we are about to speak falsely, it warns us with unease. When we witness injustice and remain silent, it stirs us with discomfort. When we do what is right, even at a cost, it rewards us with a deep and lasting peace. But the conscience does not force, it only nudges. It whispers when we are tempted to lie, cheat, or take revenge, and though we can silence it temporarily, its absence leaves a hollow space within us. Ignoring the voice of conscience is dangerous, not because it leads to immediate punishment, but because it dulls our ability to hear God. Each time we choose to ignore it, we build a wall around our hearts. At first, the voice grows fainter, but eventually it can disappear altogether. This is how small compromises lead to great moral failures, not through sudden rebellion, but through the slow erosion of the soul's sensitivity. The greatest tragedies of human character begin not with monstrous acts, but with the quiet habit of ignoring what one knows to be right. Yet, when we choose to listen to our conscience, even when it costs us, something profound happens. We begin to experience a clarity that cannot be explained. It may lead us down harder paths where we lose opportunities, friendships, or comforts, but it also brings a strength of character and a life anchored in truth. God often uses our conscience to test our faithfulness in the small things, knowing that those who are trustworthy in little can be entrusted with much. Sometimes the voice of conscience becomes loudest when we have made a mistake. It comes not to condemn but to correct. Regret, though painful, can be a sign of grace, a second chance to set things right. Many people, when they feel guilt, choose to run from it, but guilt, properly understood, is not meant to crush us, but to turn us back toward the good. God's voice through our conscience is not the voice of accusation, but of invitation. Come back and do what is right. In a world that often blurs the lines between right and wrong, the voice of conscience remains a steady guide. It does not change with trends or opinions because it comes from a source beyond ourselves. The question is not whether we can hear it, because we can, but whether we will listen. And if we do, we may find that it was not only our conscience speaking, but God Himself, guiding us toward the life we were created to live. There are moments in life when a sudden opportunity appears, a chance that feels too timely to be a coincidence, or perhaps we face a difficulty that, in hindsight, leads us to something unexpectedly good. These moments are not accidents. They are divine appointments, signs that God is speaking through circumstances. Often we search for God's voice in grand revelations, but He frequently guides us through the events of our everyday lives. The problem is not that He is silent, but that we fail to recognize His hand in the unfolding of our circumstances. When doors open unexpectedly, it can be a sign that God is leading us forward. Opportunities that come without our striving often carry the fingerprints of divine providence. They arrive at just the right time, meeting a need we hadn't even fully understood. Yet, how often do we hesitate, questioning if we are ready or if the opportunity is too good to be true? God's timing rarely matches our expectations, but It is always perfect. He arranges circumstances not only to bless us, but to grow us. Sometimes the opportunity is not just about success, but about shaping our character through obedience and trust. However, not every open door is from God. Just as He guides through opportunities, He also warns us through obstacles and closed paths. Sometimes a difficulty or delay is not a denial, but a redirection. We often mistake resistance for failure, but God may be using it to steer us away from danger or prepare us for something greater. Joseph's years in prison, for example, seemed like setbacks, but they were steps toward his destiny. What felt like obstacles were, in fact, God's appointments in disguise. God also speaks through the patterns in our lives. If the same kinds of challenges keep appearing, it may be a sign that He is trying to teach us something. Repeated failures or conflicts are not always signs of defeat. They may be divine lessons we are refusing to learn. Ignoring them only prolongs our struggle. But when we pause and ask, "What is God trying to show me through this?" we often find wisdom hidden within the difficulty. The most profound moments of divine guidance often come when circumstances align with an inner conviction. We may have felt a stirring in our hearts to change direction, and suddenly an unexpected event confirms it. These moments of alignment, when the outward path matches the inward call, are often God's way of saying, "This is your path, walk in it." But perhaps the greatest danger is to see these signs and dismiss them as mere chance. The world may call them coincidences, but a life of faith recognizes them as providence. God is always working through the circumstances of our lives, both the joyful and the painful. The question is not whether He is speaking, but whether we are willing to see His hand and trust His leading. If we pay attention, we will find that our steps are not random. They are guided by a hand that knows the way better than we ever could. In every season of life, God is speaking, sometimes through closed doors, sometimes through repeated messages, and often through the peace or restlessness within our hearts. He speaks through our conscience, through the patterns of our circumstances, and through the quiet whispers that guide us when we pause to listen. The question has never been whether He is speaking, but whether we are truly listening. God's voice is not always loud, but it is always clear to those who seek it with an open heart. Ignoring His signs may lead us to confusion and regret, but paying attention can transform our lives in ways we never imagined. His guidance may challenge us, but it will never mislead us. He may close doors, but only to open better ones. He may unsettle our hearts, but only to lead us to peace. And He may allow difficulties, but only to prepare us for a greater purpose. If you've been missing His voice, it's not too late. Start by listening, not only with your ears, but with your heart. Watch for His patterns, trust His peace, obey His nudges, and you will find that the path ahead becomes clearer with every step of faith. I wish you all the best as you share this powerful message. May it inspire those who hear it to listen more closely to the signs God places in their lives. Thank you for choosing to spread a message of faith, hope, and wisdom. Good luck with your speech, and may your words touch hearts and transform lives.